Brett McKay here, and welcome to another edition of Man to Man, where I take questions from Art of Manliness readers about just about anything. Could be about fashion, style, life, career, whatever. And I give my bit of friendly advice man to man. And this week's question comes from a gentleman named Sebastian. And Sebastian writes this: I'm 21 years old and I'm a successful student and I have a scholarship at a university. One of the things I enjoy doing is reading about people who contributed greatly to science and math. Sometimes after reading long enough, I come across a man who is in his mid-20s and made a huge contribution to what was known at that time to science. After reading such articles, I feel proud of them. They were so young, yet they were smart enough to formulate a thesis, discover or invent or prove something that would change the world. But then new thoughts pop into my mind. Why am I not as good as they were? What made them so good? What do they have that I don't? And literally, after a few minutes, I'm down, confused, and depressed. So my question is this: is any advice on how to deal with this? How not to compare myself to geniuses, and how to overcome feelings of worthlessness and helplessness? All right, well, Sebastian, that's a great question. I think that's a concern that's a lot of young men I think a lot of young men have had those feelings. I know I have. There's actually a website that you can go to where you can put in your age, and it'll create a list of accomplishments that famous people had achieved by the time they were your age. So if you put in 28, like I'm 28, the list might say something like, Albert Einstein had discovered this by the time he was 28. Ernest Hemingway had written this. Alexander the Great had conquered half the world by the time he was 28. And you can look at this long list, and yeah, it can get kind of depressing when you start comparing yourself. My bit of advice, first off, would be, just don't beat yourself up over it. Don't compare yourself to other people, because whenever you compare yourself to others, you're always going to lose. Something a mentor of mine told me, and it's really stuck with me. So just quit comparing yourself and just focus on yourself and on improving yourself and beating just improving on what you've done before in the past. So compete with yourself, not with others. And then the other thing I think you should take solace in the fact that studies are beginning to show that the average age of individuals who are making big new contributions to science is actually getting older. There's a study done a few years ago looking at the age of Nobel Prize winners, and they found that over the past century, the average age of Nobel Prize winners in science and economics has actually gone up by 6 years. And the conclusion that the study came to was the reason why this is happening is that it just takes a much longer time today in the 21st century to make new discoveries, because there's so much more to learn that you have to know, kind of the base knowledge you need to know before you can make new contributions to that. You compare what people knew about science or economics 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and it wasn't very much compared to what it is today. And so you have to devote a lot more time to learning that base knowledge today than you did 100 years ago. So, you might be in school and working on your PhD or doing research for 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years before you make a new discovery. So if your goal is to be, great in science, you just have to accept the fact that you're going to have to spend 10, 15, 20 years of dedicated study and research to achieve that goal. That's just the way things are today. And what's interesting too, this cuts across fields, not just in science or in economics, but if you want to be great in anything, if you want to be the best in any field, you have to put in the time. Studies have showed that you have to put in at least 10,000 hours or about 10 years of dedicated practice, dedicated study, and dedicated performance to become truly great and master your field. So if you're a businessman, if you're a writer that wants to write the next great American novel, just accept the fact that you have to spend a lot of time doing that. So it's just going to take patience and resolution. All right, so that's my bit of advice, Sebastian. Just keep in there and hanging. I know you can do it. So that wraps up this edition of Man to Man. If you have a question you would like to answer on Man to Man, you can email me at brett@artofmanliness.com or just use the contact page on our website. And until next time, this is Brett McKay telling you to stay manly.